I've been a park ranger for over a decade, and I've seen my fair share of strange things. Missing hikers, mutilated animals, odd lights in the sky, stuff that would make most people quit after a week. But nothing has ever shaken me like what happened in Blackwood National Park last winter. It started with a call. I was manning the ranger station alone that night. The winter storms had driven most visitors away, leaving the park desolate and eerily silent. My shift had been quiet until the radio crackled to life. It was a distress call, barely intelligible through the static. "This is Ranger Calloway. Repeat. Need assistance. Something's out here." Then, nothing but white noise. Calloway was stationed at the North Lookout, about 6 miles from me. I grabbed my jacket, radioed back. No response. My gut told me something was wrong. The North Lookout was an isolated cabin near the old fire tower, surrounded by miles of dense forest. If Calloway was in trouble out there, he was alone. I took my truck as far as the road allowed, but the snowfall had gotten too thick. From there, I had to hike. The woods were unnaturally silent, my breath fogging in the freezing air. The deeper I went, the stronger the sense of unease became. It was like the forest was holding its breath. Then, I found the first sign that something was wrong. About a mile from the lookout, I noticed footprints in the snow. At first, I thought they were Calloway's, but they were wrong. The strides were too long, the impressions too deep, like whatever left them was heavier, taller. And the worst part? They weren't human. The prints had elongated toes, almost claw-like, and they trailed off the path, vanishing into the trees. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a bear, despite knowing damn well no bear made tracks like that. I picked up the pace. By the time I reached the North Lookout, my flashlight was flickering. The cabin door was wide open, snow drifting inside. The lantern on the table was still burning, casting long shadows on the walls. But Calloway wasn't there. His gear was untouched. His radio, still on, emitted nothing but faint static. His rifle leaned against the wall, unfired. Then I noticed the message on the table. A notepad. The last page torn off. Scratched onto the paper in shaky handwriting. It knows my name. A chill ran down my spine. A sound, soft, almost imperceptible, came from outside. A whisper. "Ranger." It was Calloway's voice. I grabbed my radio. "Calloway, what are you?" Silence. Then, "Come outside." The voice was wrong. It had his tone, his cadence. But something was off. Like someone trying to sound human and failing. I stayed put, my fingers tightening around my flashlight. Then the whisper came again. Closer. "Come outside." I shut off the lantern and backed toward the door, heart hammering. Through the window, the snow-covered trees stood still. And then, just beyond the tree line, a figure. It stood impossibly tall, its body barely visible through the falling snow. The proportions were all wrong. Limbs too long, neck craned at an unnatural angle. But it had Calloway's face. Almost. The features were distorted, stretched, like something was wearing his skin as a mask. Then it moved. Not walked, moved. One moment it was at the tree line. The next, it was closer. Too close. I turned and ran. The snow dragged at my boots, the cold burning my lungs. I didn't dare look back. I could hear it behind me. Not footsteps. Something else. A sound like tearing fabric, like reality itself was being pulled apart. Then, a voice. "Ranger." Too close. I ran harder. The truck was half a mile away, and I wasn't sure I'd make it. My flashlight died completely, plunging me into total darkness. Then the whisper came again, right next to my ear, It knows my name. I stumbled, nearly falling face first into the snow. My fingers fumbled for my flare gun. I turned and fired. The red light illuminated the trees. And the thing, it wasn't Calloway. It wasn't human. Its mouth stretched open, far wider than any human jaw should. Inside, there was nothing but darkness. No teeth, no tongue. Just an empty void. And then, it screamed. The sound wasn't natural. It was a distortion, like a radio signal warping into static. I bolted. I don't remember reaching the truck. 1 second I was in the woods. The next I was behind the wheel, peeling out of there like my life depended on it. Because it did. When I got back to the station, I called for backup. Search teams went out at first light. They found the cabin. They found Calloway's gear. But not Calloway. The only thing they found was his notebook, buried in the snow a few 100 feet from the lookout. The last page, his last words, read, "Don't listen to the voices. If you hear your name, run." Calloway was never found. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone at the station, the radio crackles and a voice that sounds almost human whispers, "Ranger?" I've worked as a park ranger for years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The woods are alive in ways most people don't understand. Some things move when you aren't looking. Some things watch when you think you're alone. This story happened at Black Hollow National Park, deep in the wilderness where the trees grow taller than church spires, and the trails feel like they never end. It started with a missing persons report. A woman had called in, frantic. Her husband, Daniel Holloway, had gone out for a solo camping trip 3 days prior and hadn't returned. We found his truck abandoned at the trailhead. His camp was set up about 5 miles in, a small clearing near Black Hollow Lake. The tent was still there, undisturbed. His pack lay open, supplies untouched. The fire pit was cold, like it hadn't been used in days. But Daniel was gone. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no animal tracks. Just nothing. We searched the area for hours. The only thing we found was his journal, lying in the grass just outside his tent. The last entry read, "The trees have eyes. They move when I'm not looking. Something is out here." That night I volunteered to stay at his campsite. Sometimes when people go missing, they aren't really missing. They're lost, confused, maybe hurt. If Daniel wandered back, I wanted to be there. The forest was too quiet. No crickets, no wind, no rustling branches, just absolute stillness. It made my skin crawl. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it. A rustling. Not from an animal. Something big. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it into the trees. At first, there was nothing but dense foliage. Then, just as I was about to turn away, a face stared back at me. Not a person. Something else. The eyes were too large, too reflective, catching the light in an unnatural way. The skin was dark, blending into the bark of the tree behind it. And then, it disappeared. Not ran, not climbed, just wasn't there anymore. I heard rustling again, this time behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. Then I noticed something worse. The trees had moved. The path leading back to the main trail was gone. The trees had shifted, their trunks impossibly close together, blocking the way. I wasn't alone. My radio crackled. I grabbed it, voice shaking. "Base, this is Ranger Holloway." Static. Then, a voice. At first I thought it was Daniel. But the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't right. It sounded like Daniel. But there was something off. Like someone imitating him, repeating words without understanding their meaning. "The trees have eyes. The trees have eyes. Don't look." Then silence. I grabbed my rifle and started backing toward my tent. Then I saw them. Figures, barely visible between the trees. Tall, thin, their bodies blending with the bark, shifting whenever I blinked. Their eyes glowed faintly, like dim lanterns in the dark. And then, one of them moved. Not walked. Not ran. It was standing by the tree line 1 second, then 2 feet in front of me the next. My flashlight flickered. The face staring at me wasn't human. The skin was rough, like cracked wood. And its mouth, there was no mouth. Just a hollow, gaping space where one should be. I ran. I don't know how long I ran, but when I stopped, the trees had changed again. The clearing was gone. The campsite was gone. It was just me, the dark, and those things. The radio crackled again. A whisper right next to my ear. Run. I bolted. Branches clawed at my clothes, my breath burned in my lungs. The trees blurred past me, the ground uneven and shifting. The forest itself didn't want me to leave. Then, light, dawn. I stumbled into a ranger patrol. They found me half frozen, rambling about the trees. But when we went back to the campsite, it was gone. No tent, no fire pit, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. And Daniel? Still missing. A week later, we picked up something on the radio. A transmission, faint, barely coming through the static. A man's voice. Daniel's voice. I see them. Watching. They don't blink. I think they're the trees. They have my face now. Then silence. We never found Daniel. But sometimes when I'm on patrol at night, I see something in the trees. A face. Daniel's face. Smiling. But it's not him anymore. The old fire tower had been abandoned for years. No power. No maintenance. No reason for the light to be shining from the top. And yet, as I stood at the base of the rusted structure, staring up into the dark, I saw it. A dim, flickering glow from the watchroom above. I swallowed hard and reached for my radio. This is Ranger Beckett. I'm at Fire Tower 9. Got a possible break-in. Silence. Then static. And a voice. Why did you come back? My blood turned cold. The channel was open, but no one was supposed to be out here. And that voice? It sounded exactly like mine. I should have turned around. Left the tower behind, hiked back to my truck, and reported it from a safe distance. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped onto the first rotting stair. The wood groaned beneath my weight. The entire structure felt wrong, leaning ever so slightly, as if waiting for the right moment to collapse. As I climbed, the night grew unnaturally silent. No wind, no insects, just the sound of my own breath, and something else. A creak. Not from my footsteps, from above. I aimed my flashlight up, scanning the tower's skeletal frame. Something moved at the top, a shifting shadow behind the railings. Then, a soft, deliberate knock. Once, twice, 3 times. Coming from inside the locked watchroom. I reached the final steps, heart pounding. The door to the watchroom was slightly ajar. No signs of forced entry, no footprints in the dust. But the lantern inside flickered weakly. I raised my rifle and pushed the door open. The air inside was thick, stale, carrying a faint scent of rot. The room was just as I had last seen it years ago, when they shut the tower down. An old desk, a rusted chair, a radio, and something new. A single yellowed piece of paper on the desk. My name was written on it. Hands shaking, I picked it up. The message was short. You've been here before. I turned sharply, my breath hitching. The door was still open. The stairs leading down were still there. And yet, a sickening realization crept over me. I couldn't remember climbing up. Couldn't remember the last time I'd been here. Had I ever left? The radio crackled, static at first, then a voice. Hello. A pause. Is anyone there? I stepped closer, heart hammering. The voice was mine. Not just similar, identical. Ranger Beckett, this is a distress call. I'm trapped in Fire Tower 9. I staggered back. My mind raced. That wasn't possible. I was standing in Fire Tower 9, and I wasn't making that call. Please, the voice begged. I don't know how I got here. If anyone can hear me. The signal cut out. The lantern flickered. And from the doorway, a shadow moved. I spun around, rifle raised, but the doorway was empty. Just the open platform and the black void beyond the railing. Then, a whisper. Jump. I felt it before I saw it. A hand on my back, ice-cold fingers pressing against my spine. Then, a sharp push. The world tilted. My stomach lurched as I fell forward, toward the endless dark below. But before I hit the ground, I woke up, gasping, standing at the base of Fire Tower 9, staring up at the flickering light above. And from my radio, my own voice whispered, "Why did you come back?"